Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Rabbi Bolton speaking to you from the Holy Land, and we're continuing the learning that we began the last 3 days of this week, the previous 3 days of this week. And before we start, let's give charity. Charity will save the whole entire world. God, the whole world is God's charity. It's giving it to us for free. So we should give to others so that maybe God will listen to our prayers and make this world a good place. And we should stop this war, and our enemies will either become our friends or come to an end. Here we go. Let us record. Now we are learning. Let me get back to here. Here we go. There we go. Good. Yes. Okay. We're learning a speech that the Lubavitcher Rebbe made in 1987. Here it is. It's talking about the shofar, sounding the shofar on Rosh HaShana, and what exactly happens and why we do it, and etc. Now, there happens to be an interesting law about sounding the shofar, that if Rosh Hashanah, the first day of Rosh Hashanah, falls on Shabbat, we do not sound the shofar. We don't sound the shofar. Why? Because the purpose of sounding the shofar is to improve the world, to make the world a more holy place, a more blessed place. And Shabbat already does that, to a certain degree. So therefore, it's not necessary for us to sound the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Not necessary for us to sound the shofar. And even to the degree that the rabbis even made a decree that you should not sound the shofar, because maybe you'll come to carry, there's the sounding the shofar is so unnecessary that maybe you won't have help from heaven, and you might just forget the whole business of Shabbat and carry it in a public place to go to show a rabbi the laws. Anyway, that's a little bit difficult to understand, but the fact is, when Shabbat comes, we do not sound the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. I mean, there happens to be 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, but the second day is not as powerful as the first, and the first is the most powerful. And if that first day falls on Shabbat, which that's the way it was, I think, when the Rebbe gave this speech, as so you don't sound the shofar. But in the Holy Temple, they did sound the shofar, even on Shabbat. Why? Because the Holy Temple, that was like it's going to be in the future. It was a perfect place. The Holy Temple was a perfect place. Good morning, Paul. Was a perfect place, especially the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies was a perfect place. The Holy of Holies was something like what the whole world is going to be. What the world is going to be. When Mashiach comes, the whole world will be perfect. And perfect means it'll be exactly the way it is now. But we'll see godliness. As the world won't push away God. We'll see that the place where the world is, God is also. There's an alternative. Either there's God or there's the world. Right? So God is the world. It's not so. God is everywhere. And what does that mean? How could that possibly be understandable? Well, it's impossible to understand. I have this camera that's delicately balanced over. I have to get a stand for it. Okay, so the world is really purely godly, and that was only evident really in the Holy of Holies. In the Holy of Holies, there was the ark with the tablets inside, and it had to be of a certain measurement. But nevertheless, when they measured it, it was there. But then when they measured its distance from the walls around it, it didn't take up any place. Its measurement was missing. So it was there, and it was exactly there. It had to be exact measurements. But on the other hand, it wasn't. The same thing with the world. The world is here, but when we try to look at it closely, we'll see that it's really not here. The world is just really pure a creation, godliness from nothing. So therefore, that's the ideal situation in the world. And when Mashiach comes and the world is in the ideal situation, we will still do the commandments, but not for the same reason we're doing it now. We won't do it to remove the concealment, but rather to make more revelation of godliness, higher levels of revelation. So the Rebbe said, right now, really, so this oneness of God, which is called Malchut, God's kingship, is concealed now, and we have to reveal it. One of the ways of revealing it is by removing the concealment inside of us. Because every Jew, let's start with the Jewish people, has what's called a godly soul, which is certain that all there is God, which is certain that the world is a big miracle, which is certain that God loves us and cares for us and creates us and provides for us. And God wants us to serve him. The godly soul is certain of this, but the natural soul conceals it, just like God's oneness is concealed. And Rosh Hashanah, we're supposed to reveal it a little bit. That's the sounding of the shofar. But we also have to work on ourselves to remove our mistaken identity, our selfishness, and etc. Okay, that's what we learned up to now. Okay, that was the idea of Rosh Hashanah. That's the anniversary of the birthday of Adam, the last day of creation, the grand finale of creation, when the whole creation was finished. And so it is now man, which is me and you, had the same job to finish the creation, to put the finishing touches. Namely, now our main job is to remove the concealment. Adam's job, there was no real bad in the world. But when the time of Adam, as there was the potential of bad in the world, and Adam unfortunately made that potential real. And now we have to sort of try to fix up his mistake and fix up the world. That's what we've been doing for the last 5,785 years. And more practically, it's not been that long. The first 2,000 years was total confusion. It only began people to fix it up when Abraham was born. Up to then, there were people who individually on their own fixed up themselves. But Abraham, he went out and spread the ideas of the oneness of God to the whole world, because we have to fix up the world also. Okay, so that's the idea of sounding the shofar. The shofar means to break, and the shofar also means pleasure. The teruah, shalom v'reut, pleasure, friendship. So the breaking part of it, that was not done on Shabbat. If Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat, there's nothing to break, because Shabbat is almost like the same thing as sounding the shofar. In other words, it's a pure day where there's not so much bad. But in the holy temple, they would sound the shofar. Why? Because the second thing of the shofar is re'ut, pleasure. And this, we draw down a higher level of pleasure of God. The holy temple was something like in the future world, after Mashiach, when things will be pure, the world will be pure, and we'll see godliness and everything. So then it's going to be a different world. That's why, we still have to work, and our work will be to make more good. Something like what Adam was supposed to have done, only to increase good. And therefore, when there was a holy temple, they didn't sound the shofar anywhere in Israel, because the shofar on Shabbat, they didn't sound the shofar anywhere in Israel on Shabbat, Rosh Hashanah. But in the holy temple, they did, because the holy temple gave them power to simulate the service of Adam, that he worked not to get rid of the bad, and on Shabbat there is no bad, but to increase good even in Shabbat. Oh. Okay, so that's what we said. That's how we got up to yesterday. We can say, we have their pointer over here. That same blessing, that was drawn down by means of sounding the shofar in the Beit HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple on Shabbat, is also drawn in every place and every time. Okay, how can that be? We just finished saying that, that on Shabbat, we don't sound the shofar on the first day. Why? Because Shabbat, that does the work. That does the work of it gets rid of the bad, like shofar does. So it's not necessary to sound the shofar. But in the Beit HaMikdash, they would sound the shofar, because the Beit HaMikdash, even on Rosh Hashanah, that was on Shabbat, they would sound the shofar in the Holy Temple. Why? Because the Holy Temple is not removing the bad. There is no bad in the Holy Temple. It gives us the power just to make more good. So the Rebbe said, it could be that now when we sound the shofar, it's the same thing as back then when they sounded the shofar on Shabbat in the Holy Temple. In other words, increasing good. When we sound the shofar now, it breaks the bad, but it also is the same thing as it was back then in the Holy Temple. How can it be? We don't have the Holy Temple. We'll see. Al derech the gam kishein token, like we don't sound the shofar. 1 second. Hello, Ken. אני, קשה לבוא, אם את רוצה אני אפסיק, הפסקה, אני אעשה הפסקה ואני אבוא. אוקיי, עוד 10 דקות. טוב? אל תתקדמי, תעמדי שמה. את רוצה ללכת? אוקיי, תעמדי, אני אבוא. פיצה, הפיצריה, כן, אוקיי, בסדר. שלום. I have to take my wife. She's okay, so. Okay, we say panimis inyan. The inside is like this. Hine, oto amshachat. That same thing that was drawn down in the Holy Temple can be drawn down now everywhere. How can we see a thing like that? I want to make a break here. I want to make a break. I'm sorry. 1 second. Short break. 1 second. I will do this here. Okay. Now, right, so let's discuss what exactly is happening here on Rosh Hashanah on the inside. A little bit we discussed on the outside. You sound the shofar, we make God a king. We perfect the world, we get rid of the bad that's in the world. Let's say, we can say, that if we look a little bit deeper, that same blessing which was elicited in the Holy Temple on Shabbat, when we sound the shofar, like we said, when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat, we don't sound the shofar, but in the Holy Temple they did, because Shabbat usually serves the purpose of sounding the shofar. Shabbat itself is a day where there's less bad in the world and more blessing, and that's what the shofar does. It says, but in the Holy Temple, the shofar was given more power to bring the blessing. So therefore, they did sound the shofar on Rosh Hashanah Shabbat. Where did they sound the shofar? In the Holy Temple, because the Holy Temple gave power to bring down a bigger blessing. So the Rebbe says, I think, Yesh Lomar, so the Rebbe is saying that there is to say that nowadays we also draw down the same blessing that they drew down back then when there was the temple. Al derech, something like the Gam Keshe'ein Tokin, that when we do not sound the shofar when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat, but nevertheless we say that Shabbat itself draws down this blessing by means of what? By saying the sentences. Yeah, last time we talked about the 3 blessings that are said in the Musaf prayer of Rosh Hashanah. 3 extra blessings that are said in the Musaf prayer of Rosh Hashanah. But usually, on all of the holidays, there are 6 blessings in the standing prayer. The first 3 and the last 3 are the same. And then there's one in the middle that talks about the holidays. In the Musaf prayer, the second prayer in the daytime of Rosh Hashanah, that's called Musaf, the additional prayer, there's 9 blessings. The first 3, the last 3, and then there's 3 unusual ones in the middle. What's called kingship, remembrances, and shofrot. Through 10 sentences from the Torah that prove that God is a king, 10 sentences in the Torah that prove that God remembers us, cares about us, and 10 sentences of the Torah that say that God listens to the shofar. So the Rebbe now, by saying these sentences and accepting God as a king and making God, so to speak, remember us, and we say that God listens to the shofar. By saying these things, this simulates the same thing as in the temple when they sounded the shofar in the temple. Even if now Shabbat and Rosh Hashanah coincide, and we don't sound the shofar, but by means of our saying these sentences, it accomplishes the same thing as when they sounded the shofar in the temple. Hainu, she'amirat hapasukim, saying these sentences every place and every time, this draws down that same, elicits that same blessing, or what we called before binyan malchut, building the creative power of God. Can move on, like it's explained, also that the pasukim that they see, because the sentence that we say in every place, they are kemisaper, kemispar eser, the number 10. So again, nowadays, right now, even if Rosh Hashanah falls in the middle of the week, this year I think it falls on what, Wednesday. Wednesday, here it is. Let's have this. I'll tell you 1 second. Why do I forget? Here it is. Rosh Hashanah falls on Thursday. Rosh Hashanah falls on Thursday. Wednesday night falls on Thursday. Okay. So when we pray in the daytime, we say this Musaf prayer, the additional prayer. We say it every holiday, Shabbat also. But the Musaf prayer of Rosh Hashanah contains these 3 extra blessings in the middle. And each blessing contains 10 sentences from the Torah, more exactly from the Torah and the Nevi'im and the Ketuvim. 10 sentences altogether in each one of these 3 blessings. 10 sentences proving that God is a king, 10 sentences saying that God remembers us, and 10 sentences from the Torah that says that God listens to the shofar. Now, these are sentences from the Torah. The Torah, so to speak, is a document, an official document signed by God. God, so to speak, obligated himself. He must listen to the Torah. The Torah comes from God's essence. So if it says in the Torah, it must be true and God must fulfill it. So we're bringing 10 sentences from the Torah that God himself promised, and it obligates God, so to speak. I mean, we can't get too anthropomorphic about this, but that's the fact. The fact is, we're the sons of God, that we have to take that literally, right? We're the sons of God means, to a certain degree, literally. Right? Of course, God is not a person, but that's what it's trying to tell us. We're also not people. The main thing of a Jew is godliness, and even our bodies are godly. And it says the Rebbe, even the whole world is godly. That's what we're supposed to reveal to the world. So the Rebbe said, when we bring sentences from the Torah, that forces God. This is from a book called Ateret Rosh by the second Rebbe of Chabad. That says, listen, God, you promised, you said in the Torah, you wrote in the Torah that you're going to be a king, that you're a king. You can't, deny it. You can't leave your job, can't quit. You said, God, that you're going to remember us. You're going to remember everything that we do for good. You said it. It's written in the Torah here. It's not just because you're nice. You said, God, you're going to listen to the shofar. Here I have 10 sentences from the Torah. It says the reason that there are 10 sentences for each one, this corresponds to the 10 sfirot, the 10 aspects of God's creative force. That with them is God, those are the forces behind the creation of the world, which is called God's kingship. By means of the saying, when we say these sentences, this causes God to react, and this builds the world in a better way. So again, we believe that God is creating the world constantly, every moment. And every Rosh Hashanah, God decides how he's going to do it in the coming year. Is it going to be a good year? It's going to be a difficult year. It's going to be a year of famine. It's going to be a year of plenty. God decides on Rosh Hashanah. And we go to shul to change his mind, to change God's mind. The thing should be better. The world now is in terrible shape. We should not get used to the world, accept the world the way it is. We're in the world in order to improve the world. That's why we're here. That's what God cares about. God does not care about heaven and going to heaven and punishing people in hell, and that He doesn't care about that. That's also a side thing. It's like your car goes through an auto wash, right? So it gets washed off the dirt and you put wax on it and things like that. But you don't go through, you think about going through the wash all the time, right? It just happens to be if you get dirty, so it's the same thing with heaven and hell. If a person does bad things, so there's hell. If he does good things, there's heaven, gets polished up, gets this. But that's not the main thing. The main thing is this world, and Rosh HaShana proves it. Rosh HaShana is the day that God created the world, more exactly created man, to improve the world. And that's what we do when we sound the shofar. Says the Rebbe, even the fact is there's something even higher than sounding the shofar, and that is saying the sentences of the Musaf prayer. The Al Derech, similarly, we can say that even more. Shebakol makom, that every place at any time when we say these sentences, nimshachet gam hamshachas anal she'al yedei atkiya shebamikdash, that by means of saying these sentences is drawn down holiness in every place. Says the Rebbe even more, that it's in our ability to draw these blessings down, not only on Rosh Hashanah, that at every place and every time we can also draw down this same, we can arouse God, so to speak, the same way as the shofar when it was sounded in the Holy Temple. That's the idea of the shofar of Mashiach. There's another Mimor about that. We'll see. Maybe we'll learn that Mimor also. The Yesh Lomo, we can see the explanation is this. The Hine, it's known what the rabbis say. If it says V'shachanti b'tocham, there's a sentence in the beginning of the book of Exodus. Not the beginning. The Jews get out of Egypt and they receive the Torah, and afterwards, and they worship the golden calf. God gives them the second tablets, and then right after that, God says, "Make me a holy." Really, actually, the commandment is really before that. Actually, the sentences in the Torah really say that before that. Okay, but right after that, it says, God said, "Make me a holy temple." In timeline. After that, God said, I forgive you, make me a holy temple, and I will dwell in them. That's what it says. Asali migdash, asuli migdash v'shachanti b'tocham. It doesn't say b'tocho. B'tocho nema. It doesn't say make me a holy temple, the tabernacle. Make me a holy temple, and I will dwell in it. So the same revelation that was on Mount Sinai, that was in the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle. That's why in the Holy of Holies, there was only the tablets that God gave on Sinai. That same revelation, it said, make me a holy temple and I'll dwell inside of it. I'll dwell inside of it like I was on Mount Sinai. But it doesn't say that in the Torah. It doesn't say I'll dwell inside of it. It says I will dwell inside of them. And one of the ways of explaining it is I will dwell inside of them, inside of every Jew. So even if the physical temple is not here, but the human temple is inside of every single Jew. And eventually, to a certain degree, in every human being. But the temple is only for the Jews. Non-Jews also used to go to the temple. They could also bring sacrifices. They could bring, what is it? Ula. They could bring all. The Nimsa so comes down, that in every single Jew, there is a holy temple. Shabo, that in this holy temple, Hayu Tokin, they would sound the shofar also on Shabbat. And they would bring down all these blessings. And even more. The Pasuk said that in this sentence that it says in the book of Exodus, make me a temple and make me a tabernacle and I will dwell in them. It says simply, this is the simple meaning is ala Mishkan, on the tabernacle that Moses made. But Mishkan zeh hu nitzchi. It says that everything that Moses did was eternal. This tabernacle was eternal. Kamo kol maaseh yadei Moshe, like everything that Moses made, shem nitzchim, they are eternal. The Torah is eternal. Moses took them into Israel, brought them to the border of Israel. That's eternal. Ubafrat, and especially according to what's explained in the Tanya, sheyesh bechin is Moshe, that there is this level of Moses, bekirbo shel kol echad ve'echad Israel, in each and every Jew. What is Moses? Moses is faith in God, fear of God. He was the ideal Jew. Moses and King David, Mashiach, they're the ideal Jew. So what it's telling us is what we have in potential inside of us. Moses and King David and Mashiach, they just brought in revelation what is hidden inside of each one of us. And the Moses, which is in every Jew, the Moshe, which is inside of every Jew, and this is an aspect of our soul that permeates us and rules us. Remember, we talked about in Torah Or, Yisrael, the name Yisrael, that El is the first of the 13 attributes of mercy, and it's Yisar means that it always rules. Sar means to rule. Yisrael means Yisar means it constantly. Yud is constant. Rules this level of El, the essence of God. Well, that's Moses. That's King David. That's Mashiach. The essence of God is what really rules, is dominant in every single Jew. And especially because there is in every single Jew also that's the holy temple, which is in the Jew. And every Jew also has an ark, like we said before. How do we say before? That the ark, it says, was not measured. It was pure godliness. Pure godliness. The ark was pure godliness. Doesn't mean that it was there, but nevertheless, you could see that it's just being created from nothing. You could see it didn't take up any place. Well, that's the same thing with every single Jew. And that's the same thing with the whole world. That's what's called the ark, the tablets. That's the inside of the heart of every Jew. That's the Jewish identity. That's like this name El we said before. Kamavur, like it's explained in the Kuti Torah and the teachings of the second Rebbe of Chabad. So Nimsa, sure comes out. There is in the power, the ability of every single Jew, leave all to bring about the Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah, even if it falls on Shabbat, we can still accomplish Halat Gashmiut, elevating the whole entire physical world, Gam Lamaila Mitachlit Ashlemot, even higher than the ultimate completion, the highness that was achieved in the Holy Temple. Kamo, just like by means of sounding the shofar, excuse me, in the Holy Temple. Let's say this again. Therefore, it is in the ability of every single Jew to accomplish, to bring about blessings and positive change in the world on Rosh Hashanah that falls on Shabbat. That's the way it was by the Rebbe. Halata Gashmiut, an elevation of the physical world even higher than it was in the Holy Temple, just like sounding the shofar in the Holy Temple. Okay, what happened? The Holy Temple was holy temple. Well, when they sounded the shofar, what was the purpose of sounding the shofar in the Holy Temple? It was already the ultimate level of holiness, right? It says no. The fact is there's no end to holiness, and by sounding the shofar in the temple, in the Holy Temple, on Shabbat, it made even a higher level. Shofar drew down a higher level of godliness. Something like what Adam was supposed to have done. God put Adam in Gan Eden. Gan Eden means heaven. It was heaven on earth. And he was put there in order to improve the situation, to make it more godly, to make it more evident the infinite, the presence of the Almighty Creator in every detail of the world. That's what Adam was supposed to do. So Adam, so to speak, was put into the Holy Temple. That's what Gan Eden was, heaven on earth, Holy Temple, and to improve it. And that's what happened in the Holy Temple on Rosh Hashanah that fell on Shabbat. In the Holy Temple, they would sound the shofar because it made, the shofar did something that even the Holy Temple couldn't do. Says the Rebbe, that's what's happening to us every time we say the sentences of the Musaf prayer even now. Even now. Why? Because each and every Jew is a holy temple. And as such, being a holy temple, so it's true, according to law, we're not supposed to sound the shofar. Don't take this out of, I'm a holy temple, so I can sound the shofar on Shabbat. That's not what it means. Don't make up things on your own. It means that by saying the sentences of the Musaf prayer, that draws down the same godliness as sounding the shofar in the holy temple, and even more. And even more. Ubafrat, and especially Al Pi Amuva, which is brought in the Mimorim, the other discourses of the Rebbe from the Zohar. It says on Shabbat, it says, Naaseh, there is made at Pashtuta, a spreading out, the high Nakuda of this one point of godliness, namely a binyan shalem of the spirit Malchut. The one point that's the letter Yud in God's name, that's, so to speak, the essence plan why God created the world. And that plan on Shabbat is, if we do what God wants, is revealed. So we see the purpose, the godliness, why everything in the world is exactly the way why it's here. What's here for? Or there'll be a revealed light. And especially according to what is explained in the Hemshech Yadua in Rosh Hashanah. There's a long, it's even a whole book of, what is it, of 500, 600 pages, and that's written by the discourses by the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, the father of the previous Rebbe, Tafresh Samech Vav, which is what? 1886, is that right? Especially what's known, Shakal, no, that's not right. Okay, anyway, Shakal, give me a minute, 1906, 1906. Shakal Shabbat, that every Shabbat is something like the world to come. So therefore, says the Rebbe, even if Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat, and we do not sound the shofar, but by means of saying the sentences of sounding the shofar, the sentences which are found in the Musaf prayer of the day in Rosh Hashanah, by means of this, we accomplish the same thing, and perhaps even more than was accomplished in the Holy Temple when they sounded the shofar on Shabbat Rosh Hashanah. He calls that from all this, it's understood. By means of the service of the Jewish people in sounding the shofar in the month of Bechodesh, sorry, in the Bechodesh means in the renewal of the world, Bechesa, on the special day. So this fixes up Bechodesh, the renewal of place and of time. The Yom Chagenu Rosh Hashanah, this is the special day of Rosh Hashanah. By means of our doing the service of this sentence, sounding Bechodesh, shofar, the month of Tishrei, the shofar, in the special day, Rosh Hashanah, for the day of our celebration. Usually that's the day of our celebration, that's for Sukkot, that's the day of happiness. By means of our accomplishing personally all of the things that says in the sentence, even on the days when you cannot sound the shofar, we bring about the Maila above by God, who's creating the world, a change in attitude. We build Malchut. We strengthen the power of God's creating the world, but Tachlit Hashlemas, so that he should create the world in the ultimate completion, the ultimate perfection. Till it brings below, also in this physical world, to see godliness even in the most physical, mundane things. In other words, on Rosh Hashanah, God finished creating the world. The world means all the animals and the bugs and the trees and the plants. Every single detail is important to God. How can this possibly be? We'll see. But the fact is true. And it all depends on the Jews to make it happen. Kamavur, like it says in the Hemshech Now, Avodah Amiti, the true service of God is that the Gam V'Yesh Gashmi, the physical world, should be a vessel for the infiniteness of God. Or like I've said so many times before, to realize that this world and us in it is not our world. It's God's world. And God is creating it all the time. And he's the boss, and he's the director, and he's the producer, and he's the manufacturer. And this is Ola Elokim B'Teruah. That's what we say. This is one of the sentences they say before the sounding of the Teruah. Ola Elokim B'Teruah Hashem B'Kol Shofar. It's one of the sentences in Psalms. Oh, what did I do? 1 second, 1 minute. I didn't mean to do that. But here it says, in Psalms 47. Most of the sentences before we sound the shofar are from 47. Psalms 47. This is elevating Ola Elokim. We elevate, so to speak, and we refine the name Elokim, the power which God creates the world with. Elokim is plural. How God, so to speak, makes the world, which seems to be plural. God is one. How does he make a world that's all divided? That's one of God's aspects is Elokim. That's also God's aspect of Gevurah, of power. Hainu Amedida, the Hagbala, the Olam, the measurement and the limitations of the world, that the world was created with this name of God, which is called Elohim. Here it says Elokim because he doesn't want to write the name. Like it says, Bereshis bo Elokim. That's what it says in the Bible, that in the beginning, Elokim created the world. It's not to say that there's a lot of different gods or a lot of different names, but a lot of different aspects of God. The Shiur Ha'eliyah, how much is this elevated? What's to where is the world elevated? That it should be included in the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. The word Yud Kei Vav Kei is the essence of God, and that's what we say. Alo Elokim B'Teruah Hashem B'Kol Shofar. Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yud Kei Vav Kei also elevates in the sound of the shofar. That's what it says. Hashem Havaya Velokim. That's the whole idea of Yichud, unifying the name of the creator with the creation. Havaya is, so to speak, the creator, and Elokim is the creation. Hainu Pu'ola Chadasha and B'Shem Havaya, namely that the creator as well as the creation is affected. Like we say that when we do what God wants, God is happy, gets nachat ruach. This is, so to speak, an addition to God. This makes absolutely no sense, but it's true. God really cares about us. We are very, 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 very important to God. If we can say essential to God. We're not here by accident. And we prove it on Rosh HaShana. We prove that we're here with God's intention. Every instant is intentional. Nothing is by accident. Nothing is just, meaningless laws of nature. It's laws of nature, but they're not meaningless. It be God's will. That so it should be to us. That everything should be drawn down. Everything should be revealed. There should be a good year. La'alter immediately. L'chaim tovim, for a good life. B'sifron shel tzadikim, written down all of us in the book of the tzadikim. Like it says, v'atid la'asfa tzadika. It says that in the future, the tzadikim, the totally righteous Jews, Mashiach will bring them b'tshuva, to do tshuva. Tzadikim gemorim, to tshuva. Because the level for which everyone is striving now is, and what we call pure godliness, is not pure godliness. Mashiach will reveal a level of pure godliness which is infinitely higher. Infinitely higher. And so when Mashiach comes, as even the greatest of tzaddikim says, will do tshuva. They'll realize that they have not realized their potential. That's what tshuva means. Going back to what your potential is and revealing it. They'll realize that they had much more potential than they thought. And that's the whole idea of the Geula Mitit Vashlema, in the future redemption. What's going to be redeemed? Our true potential, our pure, our pure potential will be revealed by means of the Mashiach. Or like it's revealed in the Hemshech, in the Siddur of the Arizal. The Arizal has a book called the Siddur Arizal. There's a couple of the Yaakov Koppel has one. There's a couple of the versions of it. The Teruah, it says over there, it talks about the intentions of sounding the shofar. So it says that the tekiah is Abraham, and the teruah, then the tekiah is Abraham, right? And that the shvorim is Yitzchak, and the teruah, the teruah, that's Yaakov. That's what it says there. And also David. David is the Malka Mashiach. When the Rebbe used to sound the teruah, I'll tell you in a second. That's Mashiach Tzidkenu, Bimei Rabbi Yameinu, Mamash, really. Oh, by the way, we sound the shofar today, don't we? Wow, wow. Okay, so I'll have to get that ready. But let me just, and interestingly, very interestingly, the tekiah is do, and teruah is do, and shvorim is do, do, do. And so on the shvorim, there's a limit. You can only do 3. Do, do, do. Right? Tekiah, technically, there is no limit. You can sound the tekiah as long as you want. As long as you want to. But you can only sound 1. Do, 1 in the beginning, 1 in the end of each group. We'll talk about it. Do. But the teruah, there's no end to it. You can blow sound as many as you want. And the Rebbe, I was there by the Rebbe when he sounded the shofar. I was there 3 years, I think, even 4 years. And he would sound, I don't know how many. There were people that probably counted, but I did not. But he would sound until his face would become blue. It was just amazing. I saw it with my eyes. His face would be red, and then it would just be blue. And he would, until he just didn't have any breath anymore. It would sound it through. It was really amazing. That's how he would sound the show. It was really amazing. He said the teruah, that's Yaakov and David. David is Malka Mashiach. Mashiach Tzidkenu Bimei Rabbi Yameinu should be revealed now.